Hey, this is Carlos Cavallo. Welcome back, and I'm going to cover some more great relationship advice for you. Secrets to unlock his heart. That sounds like such a good thing to do, doesn't it? Today we're going to talk about something. I got actually a really good, interesting question from one of my readers, and it was on the topic of turning friends with benefits into something real or a real relationship. And I think a lot of women can relate to her situation, which is why I wanted to cover it here. But before we get into our email, I want to talk a little bit about the amount of clichéd advice out there. All right. And this is important because it's going to help you better appreciate my reader's question from kind of a big picture point of view. Anyway, what I wanted to say was that most people give out rather clichéd advice without really thinking about, too much about what they're saying. A lot of my friends used to do this, used to really irk me because their advice, it basically overlaps with just enough common sense to make you think that it works. It sounds good. It's got that touchy-feely, inspirational postcard kind of feel to it. But in effect, what they're really doing is they kind of hijack commonly known stuff. And you know what? This approach works in some cases, but the problem is we don't know why it works. And that's where the problem lies. What happens is that as a result, we usually end up misusing or abusing that particular kind of advice. For instance, one of the most common dating tips for women about handling men and sex is don't give up too quickly, right? Probably heard that before. Just don't give up so soon. Now, why is that from any standpoint good advice? Well, being empowered equals it's not a license for bad decisions, okay? Here's the deal. We live in a society that has, for the most part, promoted the idea of women becoming more like men in order for them to feel equal to guys. Just the way things are, unfortunately. And we promote this masculine stereotype and believe that a woman can only be successful if she's more like a man, right? It works in the workplace, and that's what we kind of learned. If you've watched Mad Men, I just finished watching the whole series, and you kind of get, there's one of the plot, or I guess you call it the theme threads, is the empowerment of women in the workplace. They were going from not just being secretaries anymore to holding, real positions in companies. So in the workplace, a woman is driven to behave like men and lose her feminine edge in the process. She actually loses all of the things that make her incredibly strong and powerful as a woman. And aside from that, we also promote that women, by virtue of liberation, the old women's lib thing, can and should do the same things that men do. In particular, this includes things like reckless, purely for pleasure sex. By the way, all men are perceived as doing this on a lot of levels, but this doesn't necessarily apply to all guys, right? So what happens then? We have a multitude of television shows in American culture that promote a lifestyle where a woman can basically sleep with any guy with no strings attached. And by extension, she has the same kind of sexual experience and relationship experiences that men are perceived to have all the time, right? So we've kind of doubled up the misperception. There's even books, I think, that talk about how to date like a man or how to have sex like a man. Now, is this really a good thing? Well, I'm going to leave that a little open-ended for now because we've yet to fully figure out just how helpful this kind of advice really is, right? You got to take a step back and reevaluate your priorities. At some point, you have to wonder if this approach will help you get what you truly want out of dating and relationships. You have to think about the advice you're getting and the goals that you've got for yourself. You have to ask yourself, am I really getting what I want? And I don't mean to get all mercenary on you. I mean, it's not just about what you want. It's just that a lot of people date just for the sake of dating. Like, dating itself is the thing you should be doing. It's their be-all, end-all. Now, for a woman, sometimes it's about getting married or having a long-term relationship. To her, well, that's all that matters, and she does everything to further herself towards that goal. All right, enough of going on this crazy tangent. It's time for me to get into my reader's question. This is what Maria from Santa Monica, California, had asked me. She said, hello, I'm in the middle of a dilemma here. I'm in a mostly friends with benefits relationship. The guy I'm involved with and I have a really strong connection with, but I sense he's lost his emotional attachment. At the beginning, we would talk and text and talk very often, but after casual sex had started, it diminished greatly to the point where he doesn't call or text anymore. He texts me how much he missed me and how great he felt being with me and all, but lately, nothing. We work together and we're very good friends. We talk about everything and every day while we're working together, but not at all on weekends or after hours, other than when he comes to sleep over. Now, I'm the single mom of a 4-year-old, and he's single. I have no help, so we don't go out at all. Usually once a week, we talk about getting together, and he sleeps over. We watch movies, talk, listen to music, of course, and we have really amazing sex, but that's the end of it. During work hours, we go for the occasional lunch and walk and talk most of the day. I need your advice on what to do to stop this behavior on his side. He's a great guy, and I have strong feelings for him. Should I stop the sex? And how do I do it in a way that we don't miss the chance of having a real relationship? What should I do if I want things to move forward? Thank you very much for your help and advice. Sorry for the long message. Ladies, you don't have to apologize for your messages. It's so funny because every woman that writes into me apologizes for her message. No, I understand completely. Emotional situations also make you write a lot more than you might want to normally. Well, don't worry about it. All the information that I can tell from your situation, well, that obviously helps me. So what do we do about your predicament? Well, most women would immediately go, yeah, girl, stop sleeping with him. Obviously, duh. And I would have to agree with that. On a lot of levels, that definitely covers some of the problem, but it doesn't address the big picture. Yes, the sexual connection is important. A lot of women and men don't fully realize how important sex really is to a long-term or even short-term relationship. It's not an option. It actually has to be there for a real relationship to work. And it's amazing if you really talk to a lot of people and you dig into their relationships, how many relationships are actually sexless relationships. It's very, it's depressing on one hand, but on the other hand, it's something that you can't accept that in your life. Sex really does make up a very fundamental part of any romantic connection with somebody. Physical intimacy isn't something you can separate from the rest of the relationship. And I think that's one of the mistakes we've made, culturally speaking. Now, there's a danger of ignoring your other needs. We think that sex can be separated from a relationship. We assume that we can have fun, we can sleep overnight, and have casual friends with benefit sex, and that's all it has to be. But there's more to it. The human machine is so much more complicated than we think, especially the emotional side of it. In a relationship, sex is meant to be part of a greater whole. You can't just separate it. It doesn't work that way. Honestly, I think that's why after practicing a certain amount of self-satisfaction, shall we call it that, a lot of people come to a point where it just doesn't do it for them anymore. I mean, it almost becomes distasteful to take care of your own needs like that all the time without another person. And what they're thinking or what goes on in our heads is, oh God, here we go again. Sure, I'm getting rid of a little stress and tension, but am I really getting what I want? Am I really accomplishing the goals for the kind of relationship I truly desire? Not really, I say. Eventually it becomes a mechanical function to serve a need, and that's obviously not the only thing you want in your life. There's more to a relationship than just the physical connection. And like I said, there are consequences when you remove the physical equation from the big picture. There are always strings attached. That said, let's hit your question point by point and kind of go through it. You're saying that you have a strong sexual connection with your friend, but you sense that he's lost the emotional attachment. Well, this is another one of those areas that we don't really fully understand. Can a man have sex without an emotional attachment? Yes, he can. And that's part of the way that we're made up as men. That's kind of the recipe of a guy. However, we can't continue to have sex without an emotional connection. This is something most women don't know. We can't continue to have sex with a woman without developing an emotional connection. Most women don't realize that, and inevitably it goes in one of two directions. If a man is going to continue a relationship, there has to be a point where the sexual connection turns into a very intimate and integrated part of a whole relationship. Without the real connection, that real connection there, he's going to start losing interest. And that's simply how a man is. In a lot of cases, a guy can live on the novelty of having sex with multiple partners. Ultimately, however, there has to be a deeper kind of connection to keep the relationship going, and even a long-term sexual relationship. Other women have experienced this too. Maybe they've been dating a guy for some time, and they were the one that was a little bit hard to catch. And in a situation like that, the guy is the one to likely say, hey, you know what? I need a little more from this. It's funny. The person who is a little more reluctant to get into the relationship often controls the relationship flow and makes the other person more interested in a commitment. Now, Maria, I'd say in your case, this guy is being a little elusive because he reached the point in the relationship, the sexual relationship, where he needed that emotional connection. Something probably happened that flipped a switch on his head and made him think that he couldn't get that. Maybe he didn't want to be a stepdad to a 4-year-old or give up his single dating life. That part I can't say for sure, but whatever it was, he may have wanted something he wasn't getting in the relationship. And at the core of it, men have very simple drives and reasons to be in a relationship. At some point, your friend wanted your connection to evolve into a deeper kind of relationship. You may not have known when, but he did. And you mentioned that you'd get texts from him saying that he missed you and how great he felt being with you. This was the point where he was actually on the cusp of falling in love, and something else needed to happen there but didn't. Now, the reality is that if a man is getting regular sexual satisfaction from a relationship, he doesn't have the same kind of drive and motivation to complete it emotionally. But as I mentioned earlier, the relationship will move on one way or the other. He's either going to pursue the relationship or look for something else. There are no mixed signals. So a guy's behavior is actually fairly straightforward, which can be good or bad, as you probably know by now. He isn't using you, but he's also not getting what he wants in the relationship. And that puts him in a position where he's looking for more. His behavior is evidence of that. If he isn't spending weekends with you or doing anything other than sleeping over, that's the big sign right there. Weekends are prime time for real relationship building. Men and women, we both keep that window open because that's the most time that we can spend with each other typically if we work full-time jobs during the week. Think about it. You can spend time overnight without thinking about going to work in the morning. You can spend the whole day together. You can basically have that full cycle of what it would be to live together. And this is usually the practice when you're in a committed relationship with somebody. If he's not giving you that time, there's a reason for that. Now, there's another unfortunate side effect from the kind of relationship you have with him. In a situation like this, the amazing sex often acts like a substitute for a real connection. Sadly, this is one of the side of sex that we don't fully understand as average people getting into relationships. Funny enough, it's possible to share an incredible sexual spark with someone without even having a deep emotional connection. So can you really change somebody? That's what you're wondering. Now you're wondering how can you change the situation you're in? Well, part of the problem is the way you phrased your question, Maria. You said, what do I do to stop this behavior on his side? You have to realize that you might not be going about this in the best way possible. It seems to me that you're treating him like a child, and that's one place you can't go. You can't change his behavior to your liking or tell him what to say or think. I know you might have phrased it like that, but the way you stated the question does tell me quite a bit. If you want to know how to change his attitude, you first have to determine if he's gone too far away. You have to ask yourself, has it gone on too long like this? You didn't mention in your email how long this has been going on, but I do sense your situation's been like this for a while, especially because you're working with this guy. So you got to make the hard choice. In any case, your best bet is to simply de-escalate the relationship. Now, I know, I'm fully aware that this is this is extremely difficult to do. However, I've still given this advice to men and women who are in the same situation as you are. And this would not be the most ideal decision to make, and you could even call it the perfect scenario. But in the real world, this isn't something that most people are prepared to do, to de-escalate, to bring your emotions down and kind of separate yourself from the love or the feelings. They simply can't do that. We find it very difficult to dial down a relationship once we've started it, especially when we want more than what the other person does. So we're connected, we're tied, and we feel like we're addicted to that person on a certain level. So taking an emotional break from somebody we care about can put us in a state of total panic, and that's not healthy either. This is your brain on love. The hardest part is that this situation is pretty much the same thing as a drug addiction. Whether you believe it or not, your brain is hooked on the love chemicals that have been released during the time you spend together. Because they're so intermittent, those times you spend with him, you've been experiencing little spikes of adrenaline, serotonin, dopamine, and other chemicals that create basically long-term relationship connection. And what it's done is basically turned your brain into an addiction machine. You're literally addicted to the rush you get from experiencing the time with him. So you got to kick that habit. Now, unfortunately, we don't think of it this way, but this is the process your brain goes through. And as human beings, we like to think that we're really smart people, right? We're humans. We're not dogs or other animals. And being a highly evolved species and all, we fall into the trap of thinking that we can think our way out of bad situations and come out on top. Worst of all, we make the mistake of assuming that we're intellectually evolved enough to choose the people we're attracted to. And by extension, we think we can handle the relationships we have with them. But the reality is quite different. Very often, our behavioral patterns are in control of us, not the other way around. In order for us to take a relationship where we want it to go, we've got to have some really strong discipline. Our self-discipline has to be rock solid. And not only that, we need a really good system to make sure it happens. So drawing the line right here, I have a suggestion right off the bat. Maria, the first thing you should do is to make a promise to be absolutely clear about what you really want. It sounds to me like you got into a relationship that you really don't want, and you're thinking you can turn it into what you want later on down the road. Maybe you're thinking that in time you can sculpt it into the relationship that's truly meant for you. So you figured out, well, you know what? I'll let him slide in the side here. I won't make any demands. But once he's in the relationship, then I'll get him. I'll fix things, and it'll be the way it should be. And this approach, unfortunately, is all too common, and it's just not how it works in the real world. If you don't set the right precedent from the beginning, you're going to have a lot of difficulty later on. And hopefully you can see the direction that you're headed in right now. Going back to what I said, the best and first thing to do is to consciously acknowledge what it is you really want out of your relationship with him. What is it you will and won't tolerate? Where are you going to draw the line? Take an honest look at yourself. You got to retrace your steps. Think about the behaviors you exhibited. How did you get into this situation? Because if you don't see the choices you made and how they got you here and for what they really are, chances are you won't identify the other harmful behaviors that may block your relationship. And without a better perspective on your relationship and what men want, you're going to keep sabotaging yourself along the way. The other step is to simply decrease the frequency of the sleepovers. You say, should I stop the sex? Honestly, doing that would probably put the whole situation into a tailspin. It would be way too much change. You'll definitely rock the boat by suddenly cutting off somebody from something you've both gotten used to. And right now, this is the only connection you have with him. So you got to ask yourself, what effect will this have on us? Would he like that, and will he go along with it? And will he suddenly come back to me begging for the sex and go, I'll do anything you want? These are questions you got to ask. Now, if you want to know more about how to create that connection, that loving kind of connection, and doing this right from the start, because that's where it really makes the difference, is to know what to do right at the beginning so that you don't mess it up and you don't create the situation that you have to figure out and fix later on. This is game-changing stuff. I want you to learn how to read a guy and really understand him and understand his emotional patterns, because once you've identified his triggers, you're never going to set off those landmines. They're going to blow up and cause you relationship problems. I want you to head on over to www.datingadviceguru.com/irresistible and learn about the amazing story of my good friend Kate, who overcame a pretty terrible situation, not too dissimilar, and not too long ago. And best of all, you're going to find out how she learned how to attract men effortlessly and how you can too. Trust me, you'll need to know how she did it, because it's the exact same way you can break out of your own rut. Go on over to datingadviceguru.com/irresistible, and I'll be back again next week with more great videos.